Introduction. The warning that hits closer than home. Have you ever noticed that the deepest wounds rarely come from enemies, but from the very people you call family? It's a paradox few dare to acknowledge, yet Scripture never hid it. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Matthew 10:36. Because sometimes the greatest threat to your spiritual destiny isn't standing outside your door, it's sitting at your dinner table. And what makes it even more painful is this: they don't intend to harm you, yet they can pull you off the path God designed for your life. Here's a spiritual truth most believers avoid. Not every family member is aligned with your God-given journey. Love does not always equal direction. Proximity does not always equal safety. Familiarity does not always equal spirituality. Some relatives are placed in your life to grow you, others to refine you. Some are meant to walk with you for a season, yet you're trying to keep them for a lifetime. And some you love deeply, but they are the very reason you haven't stepped fully into who God is calling you to become. And here, another layer unfolds. God doesn't just call you to love. He calls you to discern. Distance is not dishonor. Boundaries are not rebellion. Separation is not disrespect. Sometimes the greatest act of obedience is stepping back from the people who are pulling you away from God's voice. So today I'm asking you a question, not to condemn you but to awaken you. What in your family is draining your spirit? Who is silencing the voice of God in your life? And are you willing to follow Him even when it hurts? Your destiny is calling, and sometimes the journey begins by facing the truth that hits closer than home. Part 1, Type 1, the family member who drains your faith. Have you ever realized that some people don't attack your faith? They drain it quietly, not with insults, not with arguments, but with a constant subtle force that weakens your spirit without you noticing. This is the first type of family member God warns you about, the one who drains your faith. And here's the paradox few believers ever confront. They may genuinely love you, yet still suffocate the spiritual fire inside you. Scripture says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs 4:23. But how can your heart stay guarded when the very atmosphere around you, created by people you love, is draining your courage, your hope, and your trust in God? Here is the first layer of truth. Not everyone who loves you strengthens you. Some family members speak doubt into every dream God gives you. Some mock your faith as too much. Some question every step of obedience you try to take. Some roll their eyes when you talk about prayer or church, and without realizing it you begin shrinking your faith just to keep their approval. You dim your light so they won't feel uncomfortable. You silence your testimony so they won't react. You lower your expectations so they won't call you unrealistic. But here's the deeper layer, one we rarely admit. Faith does not grow in environments of chronic negativity. If every time you come around them, your spirit feels smaller, if every conversation leaves you feeling less courageous, if every attempt to rise is met with discouragement, then you're not imagining it. Your faith is being drained, drop by drop, word by word, atmosphere by atmosphere. And this truth unlocks another dimension. You are responsible for stewarding your spiritual atmosphere. Even Jesus removed himself from certain people, so his assignment wouldn't be hindered. If the Son of God guarded his environment, how much more should we? So I ask you today, not to condemn you, but to awaken something inside you. Who in your family leaves your spirit weaker, not stronger? And are you willing to set boundaries so your faith can breathe again? Because the destiny God has for you requires a faith that's alive, not a faith drained by voices that were never meant to guide your calling. Part 2, Type 2. The manipulator who controls you through love, guilt, or fear. There is a paradox. Many Christians refuse to confront the person who controls you the most is often not the one who's forceful, but the one who uses love as a chain. Not through anger, not through shouting, but through gentle sentences that feel harmless, yet tighten around your soul like shackles. If you loved this family, you would. If you don't do this, you're disappointing everyone, you're being selfish. Suddenly, you realize they don't need power to control you. They just need guilt. And with a single sentence, you cage yourself. This is the second type of family member God warns you about: the manipulator who controls you through love, guilt, or fear. They use family duty like a rope. They use obligation like a hook. They use fear of losing them like a lock that keeps you tied to their expectations. And here is the first spiritual layer that unlocks. Manipulation wrapped in love is still manipulation. Not every soft word comes from God. Not every sacrifice for family is aligned with His will. Not everyone who cries or gets hurt by your obedience is actually right. Scripture speaks clearly. You did not receive a spirit that makes you a slave again to fear. Romans 8:15. If God freed you from fear, who is trying to put that chain back on your shoulders? Here's the second layer. A manipulator doesn't need strength, just priority in your heart. If they can make you afraid to disappoint them, if they can make you feel indebted, if they can make you terrified of losing their approval, they can bend your spirit in any direction they choose. But this is the deepest truth. If you must sacrifice obedience to God to keep someone happy, that person is sitting in a place that belongs only to Him. You were created to follow God's voice, not the fears of others. You were called to walk in divine purpose, not in distorted family expectations. So today I ask you gently but honestly, is someone guiding your spiritual steps through guilt, fear, or conditional love? And are you willing to reclaim the freedom Jesus paid for with His own blood? Because God called you to live in freedom, not in bondage disguised as love. Part 3, Type 3. The person who cannot celebrate your calling and feels threatened by your growth. There is a hard truth many believers avoid. Not everyone who loves you is happy when you grow. Some family members will support you, as long as you don't rise too high, as long as you don't change too much, as long as your calling doesn't make them feel small. This is the third type of family member God warns you about: the person who cannot celebrate your calling and feels threatened by your spiritual growth. Not because they're evil, not because they hate you, but because your elevation exposes the parts of themselves they refuse to confront. And here is the first layer of truth. Your calling reveals hearts, especially the hearts closest to you. When God lifts you up, you expect applause, but instead, you get silence, a forced smile, a quick change of subject, a subtle downplaying of what God is doing in your life. They don't say congratulations, but they also can't hide their discomfort. Just like Joseph's brothers, they weren't bothered by the coat. They were bothered by the dream, because the dream exposed what they didn't have the courage to become. Because the dream made them feel left behind. And now the second layer unfolds. Some of the people who love you the most fear the version of you God is turning you into. When you grow, they lose control. When you get stronger, they can no longer manipulate you. When you follow God boldly, they don't know what role they hold in your life anymore. Your growth shakes their identity. But here is the deepest truth. Their silence is not a sign you're wrong. It's a sign you're getting closer to what God ordained. When God moves in you, Not everyone recognizes it as a miracle. Some only see it as a threat. So let me ask you today, are you shrinking your calling to keep someone else comfortable? Are you dimming your dreams so their ego won't break? Are you slowing down just so they won't feel left behind? If God placed a calling inside you, you are not required to make it comfortable for anyone. Rise anyway, grow anyway, and let God handle the rest. Part 4. Type 4. The one who keeps you stuck in your old identity. There is a painful paradox in the spiritual journey. God is making you new, yet someone in your family is determined to keep you old. They don't see you the way God sees you. They don't acknowledge what God is forming inside you. They see you only through the lens of who you used to be, and they want to keep you there forever. This is the fourth type of family member God warns you about, the one who keeps you stuck in your old identity. Not because they are malicious, but because your old identity was comfortable for them. Here is the first layer of truth. Some people are not against you. They are against your transformation. They bring up your old failures, your old weaknesses, your old decisions, the ones you repented of long ago, and they use those memories like chains to keep you from moving forward. You say you've changed. They say, I know who you really are, don't act holy. You say you want to walk with God. They say, everyone remembers how you used to be. You say God is doing something new. They smirk and say, we'll see how long that lasts. But here is the truth. Few believers dare to admit they need you stuck in your past, so they don't have to confront their own. Your old self makes them feel safe. Your new self makes them feel exposed. Because they're not changing, they don't want you to change. Scripture captures this tension in one heavy statement. A prophet is without honor in his own hometown. Luke 4:24. Even Jesus, in the eyes of relatives and neighbors, was still the carpenter's son. They heard his wisdom, yet they were blinded by the version of him they remembered. And now the deepest layer unfolds. If you let others define you by your past, you will miss the future God prepared for you. You are no longer who you were. God has renamed you, refined you, and called you into a new identity. So today, let me ask you, are you living small because someone keeps bringing up who you used to be? Are you holding back the version of yourself God is shaping, just to keep the peace? Step out, rise up, and let God, not your past, and not the people who cling to it, define who you are becoming. Part 5. Type 5. The family member who pulls you into sin or away from God's path. There is a paradox most believers never talk about. The person who pulls you farthest from God is often not the world, it's someone inside your own family. They don't intentionally drag you away from the Lord. They simply pull you back toward old habits, old patterns, old temptations you fought so hard to escape. This is the fifth type of family member Scripture warns about, the one who pulls you into sin or leads you away from God's path. They don't attack your faith, they dilute it. They don't push you into sin. They invite you to just relax a little. They're not against your walk with God. They just don't want you to be too serious. And here is the first layer of truth. The enemy doesn't need to tempt you if he can reintroduce the people who weaken you. We imagine spiritual attacks coming through dark, obvious threats. But sometimes, the danger comes disguised as a harmless invitation from someone you shared a childhood with, a night out, just for fun, a habit everyone else does, a compromise that doesn't seem like a big deal. Scripture speaks plainly, bad company corrupts good character. 1 Corinthians 15:33. And this applies even when that company shares your DNA. Now the next layer unfolds. Some family members don't pull you down because they are evil. They pull you down because they never learned how to stand up. Your spiritual discipline makes them uncomfortable. Your desire for holiness feels like judgment to them, even when you say nothing. And the easiest way to silence their own conviction is to drag you back to their level. But here is the deepest truth. No one has the right to pull you off the path God has marked for your destiny, not even family. You cannot chase their expectations and still walk fully in God's will. You cannot entertain old habits and still step into the holiness He is calling you to. You cannot move forward while someone is pulling you backward. So today I ask you, with love, but with clarity, who is pulling you away from God's voice? Who is nudging you toward compromise? Who is inviting you back into the very things God delivered you from? Do not let comfort destroy your calling. Do not let family ties destroy your holiness. Step out, because God is calling you into a higher life. Part 6. Type 6. The person God separates you from to protect your destiny. There is a paradox of grace most believers never recognize. Sometimes the very thing that protects you the most is the separation that hurts you the deepest. Not every departure is a loss. Not every closed door is a failure. And not everyone who walks away from your life is a betrayer. Some people leave because God intervened before the damage you couldn't see would reach you. This is the 6th type of family member, the person God separates you from to protect your destiny. They may be someone you love deeply, someone you trusted completely, someone you never imagined living without. But God saw what your eyes could not, and He acted before the storm touched your life. Here is the first layer of truth. What you call abandonment, heaven may call protection. You call it rejection. God calls it rescue. You call it loss. God calls it redirection. You call it an ending. God calls it a beginning. Scripture says, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Separation in the present is often revelation for the future. Now the second layer unfolds. God will not allow anyone to enter a season they are not anointed to walk through with you. Some people were right for your past, but unfit for your future. They cannot handle your calling. They cannot carry your vision. They cannot grow at the pace God is stretching you. And if they stayed, they would wound you in ways you never expected. Now the deepest layer opens. Separation is not always punishment. It is often redemption. God does not remove people to leave you lonely. He removes them to keep your destiny intact. He knows you would never cut the tie yourself, so He does it for you, not because you are weak, but because you are chosen. So today let me ask you with love and clarity, who walked away from you that you never understood? Who drifted from your life yet your heart still clings to them? And can you believe that their departure may have been God's protection? Let what God separated stay separate. Let the doors He shut remain closed, and step forward, because your destiny is worth protecting at any cost. Part 7. Why God warns you. The spiritual principle behind separation. There is a spiritual paradox most believers never confront. God doesn't just open doors for you, He also closes them. And many people are wounded by the doors God shuts, never realizing He is protecting their soul from dangers they cannot yet see. Here is the spiritual principle behind separation. Separation is not always loss. Sometimes it is purification. God does not separate to punish you. He separates to prepare you. He does not take away to leave you lacking. He takes away to make you whole. Here is the first layer of truth. Not every relationship is designed to walk with you into the destiny God prepared for you. Some people belong only to your past season. Some can walk with you only part way. Some were sent to teach you a lesson, not to accompany you for life. If you hold on too long, you carry weights God never intended you to bear. Scripture says, Go from your country, your people, and your father's household. Genesis 12:1. Abraham could not enter the promised land until he left the people who were not anointed to go with him. That wasn't dishonor, it was obedience. Now the second layer unfolds. Separation is often a sign of elevation. Every time God prepares to do something new, he removes what no longer fits. When you rise higher, your circle gets smaller. When you go further, not everyone can keep up. When you mature, some relationships naturally fade. That isn't chaos, it is heavenly order. And now the deepest layer opens. God warns you about certain people, not because he hates them, but because he loves you. Grace doesn't just expand, grace protects. Mercy doesn't just lift you up, mercy separates you when needed. When God says do not walk with them, it is not control, it is divine safeguarding. So let me ask you today, are you holding on to what God is telling you to release? Are you clinging to people heaven has already closed the door on? Do you have enough obedience to believe separation can be a miracle too? Step into this principle. If God closes it, don't reopen it. If God separates it, don't reconnect it. If God leads you forward, don't look back, because your destiny is not in human hands. It rests in the hands of the one who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Part 8. How to discern without becoming bitter. There is a spiritual paradox. Many believers never recognize you can discern correctly and still carry the wrong heart. You can see exactly what God is warning you about. Yet if you are not careful, hurt, disappointment, and betrayal can slowly turn your heart bitter. But God has never called you into bitter discernment. He calls you into wise discernment wrapped in love. Here is the first layer of truth. Discernment is not condemnation. It's obedience. You do not need to hate someone to recognize they no longer belong in your spiritual journey. You do not need to retaliate to walk away from harmful patterns. You do not need a hardened heart to protect your soul. Scripture says, "Be wise as serpents and gentle as doves." Matthew 10:16. Wisdom keeps you alert. Gentleness keeps you from becoming bitter. Now the next layer opens. You can set boundaries without shutting down your heart. Boundaries are for protection, not punishment. Distance is for healing, not contempt. Some people you truly love simply cannot walk with you into your next season, and you have the right to choose peace over chaos, healing over hurt, and light over the darkness that tries to pull you back. A deeper layer unfolds. Bitterness is a sign you are looking at the person, not at God. Bitterness comes when you believe someone ruined your future. Faith reminds you no one can stop what God ordained. Bitterness comes when you feel betrayed. Revelation reminds you God was protecting you. Bitterness comes when your story centers on the wound. Healing comes when your story centers on grace. And now the final layer. Mature discernment doesn't push people away, it pushes you closer to God. You don't need to prove anyone wrong. You don't need to defend yourself. You only need to follow God's voice and let him handle what you cannot. So today, let me ask you, is your discernment coming from the Spirit or from your pain? Are your boundaries guided by wisdom or by bitterness? Can you walk in clarity and still keep a tender heart? Choose a discernment that doesn't harden you, but sanctifies you. Let God guard your heart as you guard your destiny, and walk forward without the weight of bitterness, because your life is being shaped by grace, not by wounds. Conclusion. Your destiny requires courage. There is a paradox of destiny that many believers never find the courage to face. God doesn't just call you to love, he calls you to choose. And sometimes the hardest choice isn't between good and bad, but between what is familiar and what is anointed. between the person you want to keep and the person God is asking you to release. Here is the first layer of truth. Spiritual destiny is not for the faint-hearted. You cannot step into what God prepared if you keep holding on to what He has asked you to walk away from. You cannot rise higher if you allow old relationships to keep you grounded. You cannot hear God clearly if you let the voices of others drown out the sound of heaven. Now the next layer unfolds. Not everyone you lose is a loss. Some are miracles in disguise. Closed doors are not meant to disappoint you. They redirect you toward the narrow path that leads to life. Breakups are not meant to empty you. They lighten you so you can run the race set before you. Hebrews 12:1. Those who leave are not destroying you. They are releasing you. And here is the final layer. Following God does not require comfort. It requires courage. Courage to let go. Courage to stand firm. Courage to walk alone if needed. Courage to believe that if God leads you out of something, He is also leading you toward something greater. So let me ask you one final question. Do you have the courage to choose the destiny God ordained for you, even if it costs you what feels familiar? Step forward, not because you are strong, but because the one who calls you is faithful, and your destiny is waiting on the other side of one more courageous step.